Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Prince-Wright, your host of Pro Soccer Talk. I'm delighted to be joined by Nick Mendola in Buffalo, New York, and Andy Edwards in Kansas City for this very special edition of Pro Soccer Talk as we focus on the European Super League, the new proposal that 12 clubs across Europe have signed up for. Super clubs have broken away a breakaway league. They want to replace the Champions League with this newly formed league. It sent huge shockwaves across the soccer world, not just in Europe, but across the entire globe, as some of the biggest clubs on the planet have decided they've had enough of playing in a competition which is based on merit and instead want to make their own rules and get even more money, and the wealthier want to get even richer. And that is something that has really got people's blood boiling across the soccer world. So just to give you some analysis from over here in England, traveling through London last night when all this was breaking. I was at Wembley Stadium. A lot of the journalists involved in this, breaking this story, were around me. And as I was traveling around on social media, the main words here in England trending were embarrassing, disgusting, greedy, shameful. This situation and the reaction to it has been the most unifying response in the history of football. And I'm going to go as far to say is that this Super League idea to close the structure and have no relegation and have the same teams in a competition each and every year is by far the worst idea in the history of football. I'm going with that, guys. I think it goes beyond everything that we love about the beautiful game, the history, the tradition. It spits in the face of over 135 years of history of the Football League in England. It makes a mockery of what these clubs stand for. When you look at teams like Liverpool and Manchester United in particular, who are leading lights in this push, the fact that they come from cities and their fan bases are working class, hard-working people who have proud histories and want to support their club, the fact that they all want to walk away now, lots of fans do not want to support these clubs anymore if they are part of this Super League. And to me, as an Englishman who lives and breathes the game, as so many people do in this country, the fact that so many people now are thinking about changing clubs, not supporting the game at all, walking away, this shows you how big of a deal this Super League is. And the latest situation is developing all the time. You have sanctions from UEFA, the Premier League, FIFA, threatening to not have these teams play, their players not playing World Cups and European Championships. This is probably the biggest situation we've ever come across, lads, in the football world right now. And I just have to start with this. Nick Mendola, what is your thoughts on this situation? Because, as I said, this seems to have unified the whole soccer world, that this is a terrible, terrible idea.
Yeah, I couldn't hate it more because of where I see it going. If you talk about how it is now, fine. But to me, and especially, look, I'll admit a bias. I don't like Florentino Perez from Real Madrid. I don't like his act. I don't like the way that he runs his club. And having him arguably in charge of this seems like a path down the line to having the Real Madrids of the world and European Super League teams now creating their own UEFA, creating their own FIFA. And when you really go down a rabbit hole, which is sadly very logical, you see a world of, well, how do they get more teams? How do they draw it in? Well, if you start to see that this European Super League succeeds, which financially it will have the wherewithal to do that, how are other clubs start to not get swayed that way? There was a report, and I won't name names because I'm not trying to cause division, but there was a report that 2 of the 6 Premier League teams linked were holdouts till the very last minute and then had to go in. And if you think they couldn't resist it, wait until teams 7, 8, 9, and 10 get an invitation. So to me, are we headed towards the same splits we've seen in some other successful sports? And I'm just kind of terrified about what the future holds. It's not fear of the unknown. It's fear of all the things that could happen. Most of them feel bad.
And I want to make it clear here. This Super League is to replace the Champions League, a midweek competition. It's not to replace domestic leagues around Europe. But the problem is that domestic leagues across Europe do not want to sanction this. The Premier League have already said they will not let their clubs play in this competition. So this is going to be a bitter battle in courtrooms across Europe. Many people are saying it's just these elite clubs trying to bargain for more power in the Champions League. I mean, Andy, your thoughts on this situation? Can you sum up how you're feeling right now about this new European Super League?
Yeah, well, I'm in agreement with everything you guys have said there. And as I'm listening to you talk, we're not talking about football clubs anymore. This is when these businesses decided we are no longer a football club. Because what is a football club? A football club is an organization, a group of people that play football in competition against other football clubs to win trophies, to advance to higher competitions until there is no higher competition to reach. That's the great thing about this game, is that when you win something, there is always something bigger to go on and win and to strive for and to try to build towards. Look at Leicester City just a handful of years ago, win the Premier League title, go to the UEFA Champions League the following season, and I believe quarterfinals, an absolutely incredible run, and all based on merit. And that's the key word you used in the open, Joe, is it was on merit. They earned their place to be in the Champions League that season. They earned the Premier League title the season before. It was one of the greatest stories in sports history, and we are effectively taking half of the meaning behind that away by doing this European Super League, where teams can close it off and they can protect themselves. It's the American sports model. It looks a lot like MLS. It looks a lot like the NBA and the NFL. You can't be taken out of it, and the money guaranteed to you on day one is guaranteed to you forever. So I do understand. I know why they're doing it. It is the money, but at the end of the day, it takes away the best parts of sporting competition. And the reason that we got into it, and I didn't get into sports as a 3-year-old because I thought, oh, you know what, 29 years from now, there's going to be a soccer league in Europe forming that's going to make a lot of really, really rich people who don't need any more money a whole lot more money. That sounds exciting to me. I didn't fall in love with that when I decided sports were for me. It's not about what happens on the field anymore. It is not about what happens on the field anymore. And that's probably the saddest thing that you can say about all of this, is the on-field product matters not much anymore. It's about who you know in this sports world now, in this football world now, and it's not about what you can do on the field.
Nick, Andy brought it up there, the American sports model. This is very familiar to all of us that watch and love American sports, the NFL. Every major league sport in the US, that's the model. There is no relegation. You are guaranteed sums of money, and it doesn't matter what happens on the pitch. If this league does go ahead and Arsenal are involved and they lose the first 10, 15 games of this season, whatever it is, they can just, what happens? They still get the money regardless, right? It's just, the argument is that these teams want to play against each other more often and create showpiece moments. But wouldn't that just take away from the allure and the excitement of when they do get to square off in these big competitions once every 5 years, or once a year? Wouldn't that just get rid of all that excitement? And actually, I'm looking at it now, wouldn't fans just be totally turned off by this and say, this is boring, this is exhibition stuff, why would I want to go and watch this? Isn't that where we're heading with this, the American sports model? And what are the problems, and why it wouldn't work in Europe?
Well, it's funny you mention it that way, because the first thing I thought of is basically every argument from the pro-rel and MLS crowd that we've heard over the last 5 to 10 years in the United States. And to be fair, that's kind of where we're at. Listen, is 14th place Arsenal playing 15th place, I don't know, Chelsea, right? Yeah, that's different. That's both London teams. Sorry, 14th place Arsenal, 15th place Real Madrid. Are you really tuning in for a game that has no consequences just because the teams are better? You're not. I think about what's been driving this for some time, and you look at a couple of the Premier League owners who are also owners in American sports. Colorado Rapids, excuse me, is I don't remember who else that Stan Kroenke owns.
LA Rams, Colorado
Rams,
Avalanche, I think the Denver Nuggets as well.
Right, and I knew it was a team that had moved. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with the Glazers. Yeah. And I start to think, think of the big four American sports. What's the last minor league market team to capture the imagination of a sport and get a seat at the table? We've seen teams move from St. Louis to LA. We've seen teams move from Montreal to Washington, but that wasn't because the FC Cincinnati had such a great fan base and such a great following that they were allowed a seat at the table. And that's my big fear, because I think about not just the club, to be honest with you, everybody knows, we talk about on the show, I like Newcastle. Yeah, but I love Barcelona as well. And I just don't see the appeal for me here. I don't see where this brings me to watch them more often. And the flip of this isn't just that we all watch the Premier League or the Champions League more. The flip of it is that you win a league and you have these super annoying fan bases telling you that your title doesn't count, even though it very much does. And it's just, there's nothing attractive about it. The Americanization is absolutely an appropriate point. If you're too defensive of our country and so you want to throw in Qatar and Russia, go ahead. How do you feel now? Because that's what it is.
Andy, when you look at this, you mentioned finances earlier. JP Morgan have come out and confirmed they're going to finance this thing. $6 billion to start with. When we're looking at that closed, secured, guaranteed money, we're talking about a good Champions League campaign now for, say, Manchester United when they're back in it. Would be 60, 70, $80 million a season. Now this is going to go up to 250 million. That's kind of the talk about what they would get. So that's a huge increase. But selling out in that manner, what's the advantages? Because I can see a scenario where fans would be that upset if this happened that they would not turn up at Old Trafford or Anfield or the Emirates. And when they are allowed to come back in the stadiums, they just won't turn up. But clubs won't really care, right? They'll still get the money regardless, because it's about the on-field product that's being shown across the world. So there's a real danger here that the heart and soul could be ripped out of these teams, the atmospheres, the history. I've been driving around England and listening to season ticket holders at the Stretford End of 40, 50 years calling in saying, if this happens, I will never go to another Man United game. I'll never watch a single second. Same with Liverpool supporters. We've seen protests outside Anfield. I mean, this is a monumental moment, and if we look back in 20, 30 years, we could say this was the moment that football as we knew it, the beautiful game, the passion, was ended.
Yeah, I know the clubs think right now, all they see is money. We don't need the fans. We don't need them to get on board with it. And even if they're not on board with it initially, they'll get on board with it. They want to watch the football. They want to come to the stadium. It's what people in England do, is it not, Joe? And so they will turn up eventually. That would be I think probably the way to apply the pressure to these clubs would be to speak or to vote with your feet. Don't go to the stadiums, on these match days or perhaps the season ticket route. There's a lot of things that I think fans can do to have an action in this, not so much a say, but an action. And that's the really important thing, because when we talk about the money, they're trying to spin it as, well, if we make more money, we can sign better players. We can give you a better team to watch, a team that's more enjoyable, a team that wins more. And I'm thinking, what teams do all the best players in the world play for already? There's not new players that are suddenly attainable to these clubs once they have $300 million a year from the European Super League. They already have all of the best players, so they're not going to go out and make a better team on the field, which, again, we get back to this. I know I keep coming back to that, and this is not what it's about. It's about the money. It's the off-field stuff. It's the business. But on the field, there is no actual tangible, I guess, positive outcome of this. The only negative outcome would be if UEFA and FIFA are able to ban players from international competitions, and then players say, well, I don't want to be banned. I don't want to play for any of those clubs. And then what happens? Then what are those? You can't put that back in the bag after you've done what you've done over the last 48 hours. So if that is enforceable at all, it could get really, really, really interesting over the next however long.
It's going to play out. It's going to get uglier. It's already ugly. There's spats publicly going out all over the place. And I wanted to say the timeline is really interesting, right? So UEFA's executive committee at a meeting in Switzerland, already planned, always going to happen on April 19th. And we understand now that all of the clubs who have since joined the Super League agreed to changes for the Champions League format from the 2024 season onwards. They requested more teams. They requested that 2 teams each season in the group stage would qualify, even if they didn't earn that place for their league position, but based on their previous UEFA coefficient from 5 years previous. So they already got that sort of guaranteed inclusion for some of their bigger clubs. And then within 12, 14 hours of the Super League announcement, UEFA has come out and said the Champions League changes are confirmed. We're going ahead with what they wanted. The format changes, more group games, 10 group stage games for each team guaranteed each season. So for me, the bargaining has been done. These super club teams pushed UEFA all the way, got what they wanted. They said, hang on a minute, we want more. We're greedier. So I want to read out, this is a quote here from Alexander Seferin, the UEFA president, okay? And I think this perfectly sums it up. He says, we are all united against this nonsense of a project. He's talking, of course, about the Super League. I cannot stress more strongly how everyone is united against these disgraceful, self-serving proposals fueled by greed above all else. It's a cynical plan, completely against what football should be. We cannot and will not allow that to change. Players who will play in the teams that might play in the closed league will be banned from the World Cup and the European Championships. We urge everyone to stand tall with us as we do everything in our power to ensure this never ends up in fruition. And finally, he said, this idea is a spit in the face of all football lovers. We will not allow them to take it away from us. Nick, what do you make of this?
Well, so I want to be on his side, first of all. Let me put it that way. And I'm with everything he had to say because I get fired up hearing it. I do want to hedge just a little bit. I want to hedge just a little bit and say, all right, but are you doing that now?
Hedge a lot, Nick. Hedge a lot. There's a lot to hedge on that.
Yeah.
Let's not paint UEFA or FIFA as the moral high ground, the victims of anything. Okay, let's not do that.
Right, but if you were to ask me today if I wanted Alexander Seferin or Florentino Perez or a Glazer running FIFA, I would or UEFA, I would jump to Alexander Seferin. That said, I get fired up the most when I think about where all the tentacles could reach. How far away are we from a huge game between Tottenham and Inter Milan being staged as Tottenham's home game in New York City or Tokyo or Dubai? These are the things, when you start to talk about taking it away from the fans, it would take such a massive populist uprising to stop this from happening in the first place, I think. I think we're going to see the experimentation, and that is incredibly frustrating. Also, FIFA goes out of its way, right, to thank the German and was it the Italian clubs who had so far failed to accept it. Oh, yeah, in the press release. They went out of their way to thank them. How far does that thanks extend? So how much of a populist revolution is there? Does the average soccer fan who right now tunes in when Real Madrid or Manchester United plays and loves them, do they say, you know what, I'm going to support Manchester. I'm going to support Bolton. I'm going to support Espanyol instead of Barcelona. Like, where does this go? Because it's going to take people speaking with their pocketbooks, so to speak. And I just don't know if people have the resolve to do that. Because do you just get past the initial anger and say, yeah, that stinks, but this is what I do. And that's what they're counting on, these ESL teams.
It is. And Andy, the most interesting thing for me is that it's the history aspect. I'm English, grew up, loved the game. Football's everything to me. So I try and take my fan hat off and try and stay professional. But we saw Gary Neville exploding virtually with rage and passion, and the two Robbies and Danny Higginbotham having their stay on our network. And this is disgusting. That's the word that's been used time and time again. Let's not forget, we're still in the middle of a global pandemic. And the clubs have picked this moment to do this when there are teams going out of business all around Europe, all around the world. There's huge uncertainty financially. And they provide a lot of financial certainty by being within these leagues. And they are now taking themselves away and saying, we want to protect ourselves. And okay, if they're businesses, that's fine. But we all know that these football teams are much more than businesses. They all stand for a lot more. On one hand, you can't say Liverpool, you'll never walk alone. club of the people. And then when it suits, actually, we're going to be a Super League club and we don't want to get relegated. We don't want to lose out in the Champions League money. We don't want any part of that. And that for me is the most disappointing thing. It's the history. It's the pyramid structure. It's the FA, just the whole aura and why people love football as much as they do around the world because of what it stands for. That you can essentially be a League Two team now. And at the start of a season, you could think, you know what? We need 3 straight promotions and we could be in the Premier League playing against Manchester United. And maybe one day, if we get the right owner or the right players, we could be in the Champions League. We qualify for Europe. I support a team that was in the 3rd division and going bankrupt. They got the right owner in. A few years later, I saw them play against Inter Milan at the San Siro, one of these Super League teams. They beat Inter Milan. Leicester City were in the 3rd division. They won the Premier League, like you said, got to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. It happens. And you're taking away the beauty of that if there is a closed market and you will never be able to play or touch any of those teams in a game that matters, I guess. But it's for me really disappointing. I guess you guys can understand why I'm so fired up about this.
Yeah. How do you stop this, Joe and Andy, from getting to, after a few years, quote unquote, International Champions Cup with the starting lineup phase? How do you stop it from becoming just, hey, this was cool, and 100,000 people went to the first final, but it's the same kind of thing again? That's the other thing. And then let's go back in time quickly. And Andy, I'm most interested in your thoughts on this as someone who maybe has a bigger say in the game than the two of us, so to speak. 10 years ago, PSG isn't in this, Marseille is. Atletico Madrid isn't in this, Valencia is. 20 years ago, Tottenham and Man City aren't in this. I mean, Tottenham might have been more on the periphery. Man City's nowhere to be found. So you might argue, and Dortmund might not be. I mean, they were the biggest club, but they were in a down spell, and Bayer Leverkusen was the biggest club. So I think to call time on it here is what feels so disingenuous. And for me, if there was a sliver of me caring about really being a part of this, it would be some sort of slow build up where teams would qualify, etc. Even then I'd hate it. But right now it's just so disingenuous and so everything I hate about our particular corporate culture.
Yeah. Less than 11 years, by the way, since Peter Crouch scored at, I think then the Manchester Stadium, right? Not even the Etihad yet, to qualify Spurs for the Champions League for the first time. So 20 years, they would have been nowhere near. 10 years, they would have been in the Champions League one time. So like, I say this with admiration and a little bit of love on today, the day that Jose Mourinho's gone, and this takes away the opportunity for Spurs fans to celebrate because Daniel Levy has dumped this news on the heels of, you know, the other really bad thing he's done this week. But there is nothing super about Tottenham. There's nothing super about Arsenal, right? There's nothing super about these teams in the Premier League that are mid-table teams that have decided for themselves, well, we are one of the biggest names, therefore we have a birthright to all of this money. And so we will take the league structure, the Champions League structure, and we're going to just change it however we need it to best suit us, to best make money for us. And that is... that's frustrating. There's a great word. I think it's a British kind of term that I really like. People are called custodians of a football club when they become, you know, a chairman or a majority owner or just have a controlling stake in a club. And I love that phrase because what it says is, you know, nobody thinks of a custodian as someone who is flashy, who is about them, who is trying to make really big moves. They are someone that is there to do a job and to keep the club, which means a lot to a lot of people and is rooted in a community and has deep meaning and ties to just to manage that on the day-to-day, not to completely alter the structure of everything and how it works. They are just there to do a job and to understand that it's an honor, really, to be able to run a club like that. And it's not being a CEO of one of the biggest businesses in the world. Like, we have gotten so far away from the romantic side of the game, if you will, the part that everybody, again, to go back what I said to earlier, the part of sports that every one of us fell in love with as a kid, that they could just say, well, that doesn't matter anymore because we want money. We don't care about that anymore. We just want money.
And it's interesting that the main players, as Nick said, Florentino Perez at Real Madrid, Agnelli at Juventus, and Juve are struggling to make the top 4 in Serie A. So those are the kind of people there. They want to guarantee, Arsenal and Tottenham as well. We want to guarantee this big money so we can stay as the elite clubs. We're scared of upstart clubs taking over. And Liverpool are in that boat now as well, where they're struggling to qualify for the Champions League. So that, for me, makes the timing of this even more interesting, because a lot of the teams who are now in this Super League and super clubs aren't going to be in the Champions League next season. So it shows you their mentality and their motives. And fair play to Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich, and Paris Saint-Germain thus far. They haven't gone in. I mean, the plan is the 12 clubs that are in, 3 more to join. So that makes 15 that are guaranteed in every season. And then 5 other clubs would earn a place every season based on whatever kind of metric they figure out. And then even those 5 clubs that qualify, though, every season do not get as much money as the 15 clubs that are in there every year. So they are still helping themselves to the bigger slice of the pie, which, again, just infuriates me. But Nick?
No, yeah, so there's just so many questions, and I'm sure they've thought about the logistics. But when those 5 teams accept their invitations and then are quote-unquote relegated, it can't be that way. They need to be permanent, because where are they going to go back to? Right? I mean, there's transfers. Are we going to see, just random name, Moussa Sissoko, who would be on an ESL club, now instead of holding out for a Champions League spot from Newcastle, is he holding out for a Super League team? Where do all things go?
But if he can't play internationally, is he going to do that?
And how about this? Christian Pulisic is a 30-minute conversation, and we only have 5. If the best player at a smaller, quote-unquote, nation, Weston McKennie, all these players, the U.S. might as well shut up shop about winning a World Cup, because if their best players are gone, I mean, I know what you're saying. Well, Spain loses their best players. They're much deeper. They're much deeper. So yes, some of this is variables, but it's not about fear. I'll tell you who it's about fear from. That's my closing point. And you need to accept this. If you're a Liverpool fan, a Barcelona fan, any of these teams that have accepted it, you're afraid. You're afraid that the success of the Premier League has given more money to other teams. There's only so much you can spend on one player. So if Everton spends smartly, West Ham spends smartly, Aston Villa spends smartly, one day you might get relegated, and you're afraid. And if you acknowledge that, then go ahead and do your Super League, because you're operating out of fear and greed, 2 of the worst things in the world.
They're afraid because being rich in football is not being smart anymore. You used to be able to straight buy the title, right? You used to just buy the most talented players. It doesn't really matter what they do or how they fit together. We've got the most talent, we'll win. Scouting, advanced stats, market inefficiencies has been a huge done a lot to level the playing field over the last handful of years. And now that these other clubs, smaller clubs with less money, are just outsmarting the big clubs, they don't have an advantage anymore. Their advantage was that they were the big club. That doesn't matter anymore. And so now they are running and saying, okay, well, we need to consolidate all the big clubs together so that people still think of us as the big clubs, because there was a time not so far ago that Manchester United was beginning to be thought of as not really that big of a club, because they were just a 5th and 6th, like Arsenal. This makes Arsenal a big club again. Tottenham, this makes Tottenham a big club in perpetuity going forward, when they've not earned that. They've not earned that right again, to come back to it. And this is the last thing I'll say, on the field, they have not earned that right to be in that company, in that conversation.
That's it. And my final thought on this is just basically the fact that clubs think that they can just do this and fans will not care. Like, fans, even if this doesn't happen now, if the plan doesn't come to fruition and UEFA carries on as normal, fans will not forget this. In the time of a huge economic and global crisis where so many people are dying, companies are going bust, people are losing their jobs, these super clubs have put themselves first, and they just want more. They want a bigger slice of the pie, and fans will not forget this. They will not forget this. And this is something that is going to rumble on. There'll be court battles for years and years. And we have only just got to the start of this. And we're getting to the point now where everyone is upset at the Super League clubs, and it's going to take a lot for them to turn this around. Andy Edwards, final thoughts.
Yeah. How many months are we removed from Arsenal making 55 people's positions no longer necessary and eliminating due to financial constraints of the pandemic? How many months removed are we from, I believe, also Tottenham and Liverpool initially doing the same and then reversing course after public backlash? They got a lot of money now. I can only assume those people are going to be brought back into their jobs immediately, right? There's no there's no two sides that they're trying to play here. They're straight down the middle and you know, totally by the book.
To sum this up, European Super League, the whole thing is shameful. It's disgusting. It stinks, quite frankly. So we'll keep you updated on Pro Soccer Talk and NBCSports.com and all the latest on these plans, the proposals, what UEFA's saying, what the Premier League, La Liga, and other leagues are going to do to try and stop it from happening. And there are so many twists and turns ahead. But lads, this has felt very therapeutic to get this off my chest today and chat with you about it. And I feel like we're going to be chatting about it a lot between now and whatever happens in the future. But a dark day in the history of football. But I'm glad that we got to chat and work through it together. So Nick and Andy, a pleasure as always. And thanks everyone for watching. Head over to Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com for the latest. Cheers, guys.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe. Make sure you subscribe to watch highlights all season long and join us at the weekend at 7 a.m. Eastern on NBCSN for Premier League mornings, and sign up for Peacock Premium, where you'll have access to 175 exclusive live games all season long.